Hello and welcome to Undivided. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much for your commitment to giving common sense a comeback. I'm Brandi, Kruse. We have no new information on the story we started with the show with yesterday, the devastating story of an 80-year-old woman who is a beloved dog walker, was a beloved dog walker in her Seattle neighborhood, who was murdered in cold blood by a carjacker who yanked her out of the car middle of the day. She had dogs in the vehicle with her, dragged her down the street, eventually ran over her with her own car and left her to die there in the roadway. We now know that her name is Ruth Dalton, and we now know the name of the man who killed her, Jamad Haynes. We also know, according to the Seattle Police Department, that Jamad Haynes is an 8-time felon who they are very familiar with. We'll get to more on him in a moment. I do want to share, again, just some heartbreaking details that speaks to the type of person that we're dealing with here in this suspect and just what a failure of the criminal justice system this is. The Seattle Police Department held a press conference last night after, thankfully, the suspect in this case was arrested. And they pieced together sort of what happened and said it wasn't until some Good Samaritans at a nearby park called them that their case really started to come together, and they started to get an understanding of what had happened after this carjacking took place.
Citizens reported that an individual was hurting a dog at Brighton Playfield. Animal control officer was dispatched to that scene, found a dog that had been stabbed to death at that scene, and noticed that the name on the collar of the dog that was deceased, the owner of that dog was the same name as our victim, Ruth Dalton.
Yeah, that was Ruth's dog, little dog Prince, who was in the vehicle when she got carjacked, threw out, left dead in the street. The suspect eventually drove that stolen vehicle over to the park, stabbed that tiny dog to death, threw its body in a garbage can. And then police were able to use witness testimony, et cetera, to figure out where he had gone from there. So the Seattle Police Department successfully arrested the suspect fairly quickly. Again, Jamad Haynes. Here's more from SPD.
The subject is under arrest, and we expect charges to be murder in the first degree, since there was murder in the commission of a robbery, and animal cruelty in the first degree. The subject has 8 prior felony convictions and history of mental health concerns.
Yeah, 2 things that aren't particularly surprising. We said on the show yesterday, this is going to be someone with a lengthy criminal history. You don't go from nothing to carjacking an old lady, murdering her, and then stabbing a dog to death and throwing it in a garbage can. So the mental health issue aspect of this isn't surprising as well. But again, you're talking about an 8-time felon. Jeremy Harris over with Como TV got some additional information on Haynes. He was released from prison in 2017, has prior convictions for vehicular homicide, which means he's killed someone before, and robbery. He also has theft of a vehicle, escape in the first degree, VOXO, delivering controlled substances, so basically some drug crimes and drug dealing crimes. Ruth is not the first person whose life he has taken. In and out of prison, 8-time felon, somehow was still on the streets, not rehabilitated from his stints in incarceration, not given the mental health treatment that clearly he desperately needs to be able to live a not even necessarily normal, but a life where he's not out hurting other people, and in this case, animals as well. Complete and utter failure of our system, no matter how you look at this. And first of all, yes, incarceration is the answer. Yeah, protecting, I'll tell you when he didn't commit crimes against innocent people, when he was sitting behind a jail cell. So yeah, people want to say, incarceration isn't the, yeah, incarceration helps. Might not fix them, as we found out here, But keeping them away from innocent people so he can't continue to take lives, yeah, being in prison helps. But it is also, when they say incarceration doesn't help, and I'm talking about like activists and stuff, they have a point in that, yeah, just throwing a violent person in prison for 5 years doesn't guarantee that when they get out, they won't commit more violent crimes. So yeah, there is a failure of incarceration to address the underlying reasons why people commit crimes. And I've heard this time and time again. You think that they're immediately day one, people who go into the prison system with substance abuse issues and mental health issues, you think they're getting the help they need? Of course they're not. Our system has utterly failed them. Incarceration has to be a combination, a balance of punishment. We have to punish people, right, for the crimes they commit. But it also has to be a balance of rehabilitation. Clearly, our system is failing to rehabilitate these offenders. And I get it. It's complicated when someone has a mental health issue. But we have a mental health system that under Governor Jay Inslee lost its federal certification. That's how bad Western State Hospital was and is. We're not doing anything for the mentally ill. And then in Seattle, where this happened, they think it's empathy or it's helpful to just leave them out on the streets, pooping on sidewalks, harassing people, screaming at all hours of the night, having mental health crises out in the open, that one mentally ill guy throwing coffee on babies, whatever it is. Oh, we can't incarcerate him though. That's not going to help. Well, it can't hurt either, right? Can't hurt either. If you've got people who are repeatedly committing crimes because of their mental health issue, you, the government, have a choice, right? You can either do nothing, which seems to be the path right now, like the guy arrested, 75 times in Seattle, finally made news after he threw coffee on a baby. And then you're like, oh, well, we'll just he can't understand what he's doing. He can't understand what he's doing. So let's just throw him out on the streets to continue to hurt innocent people because he can't understand what he's doing because he's mentally ill. Or we force them into treatment and keep them behind bars or keep them in a psychiatric hospital until we feel like they won't get out and continue to hurt people. And I get it, like individual liberty and all that stuff, but when your liberty as an American is resulting in other people being harmed, there's a line there, right? People need to be protected from you. But it's almost as if they think oh, well, since he can't understand what he's doing, well, we just got to cut him loose. No, that's absolutely not what we should be doing. And if you're telling me you can spend billions of dollars in this state on mental health treatment, et cetera, and on incarceration. Yes, incarceration is very expensive. And the services for incarceration tied to incarceration are very expensive. You're telling me you're spending all that money and it's not doing jack on the back end to make sure these people are getting the help they need, the support they need, so when they get out, that they're not going out and hurting people like Ruth? Absolute, complete breakdown. And I'm sorry. 8-time felon shouldn't see the light of day. Now, there might be some felonies that I think are probably shouldn't be counted toward that when you consider, is this someone who should go to prison for life? Old drug offenses. Do I think somebody ought to be, serving life in prison with no possibility of parole for drug offenses? Of course I don't. But when you're talking about that drug dealing, which today's day and age, if you're dealing fentanyl, all I think you're doing is you're handing someone a weapon to kill themselves. So you got that combined with robbery, vehicular homicide, already taken a life, and you just repeatedly show time and time again when you get out of prison didn't do you any good, you haven't learned your lesson, you're not capable of operating in a civil society, you're not capable of not hurting and victimizing other people, you don't belong in a civil society, you belong behind bars. There was, and I hate to make this stuff political because we have an 80-year-old woman, her friends, her family that are devastated today. Can't even imagine. I can't even imagine what her neighbors are going through, who rushed out to her aid in this neighborhood. Bystanders who tried to fight this guy off, who put themselves at risk to try to save this woman's life. The poor Seattleites at the park who saw a guy stabbing a tiny dog to death and throwing its lifeless body in a trash can and called police. Devastated for all of them. I want to separate that from the political conversation I'm going to have. I know there's a tie there, but it sucks. I'm just going to be blunt with you guys, like where my thought process is always at with these things. I've been vicious to Bob Ferguson on Twitter the last couple days over not only this, but the sexually violent predator thing. and there's this fine line between, am I really going to put a direct tie between Bob Ferguson and Ruth Dalton being murdered and her dog being stabbed to death? And people will say, that's not fair to politicize it in that way. You know what? I don't care. It is fair. He's earned it. And many, many other politicians who have failed to speak up when it mattered most in a way that would have prevented Seattle and public safety in Seattle from deteriorating to this extent. The thing is that we don't have to be in this place. We weren't in this place 15 years ago. Was there crime? Of course. There's always crime when you're in a major city. But what we're seeing here are violent attacks, random attacks, fueled by a failed mental health system, and a failed mental health system that's fueled by a drug crisis that progressives in the party of power have made exceedingly worse over the last decade. So I genuinely don't care if it's considered like politicizing something. It's just the truth. It is the truth. People like Jay Inslee, people like Bob Ferguson, many, many, many of the elected leaders that we've had in and out of Seattle City Hall for the past 15 years, many, many of the elected leaders that we've had, particularly in the last 5 years in Olympia, as the State House and State Senate have gone further to the left, as they've pushed pro-criminal, soft-on-crime policies. Yeah, they do have blood on their hands. They are to blame for this. Think of how many people were hurt. I think of little Immaculée Golde, who was struck and killed by a guy driving a stolen landscaping truck, left for dead in a ditch. I mean, that never would have happened if not for the soft on crime policies that were pushed in Olympia. So you can call it politicization. I call it the truth. And I call it holding people accountable for the horrible consequences of their actions. And then I saw... Can you pull up Bob Ferguson's tweets? I checked Bob Ferguson's campaign account. Surely, I thought he said something about this. 2 days since Ruth was murdered. A day since we found out that she was murdered by an 8-time felon. I thought surely Bob's talking about this on his campaign social media. No, you know what he's talking about? He's talking about suing people, the thing he loves the most. And then he's talking about how scary Dave Reichert is. Because Dave Reichert's anti-choice. Oh, he'll strip abortion care and health care. He's anti-choice. Literally, that's what Bob Ferguson is tweeting about. Trying to make Dave Reichert sound scary because Dave Reichert will allegedly do something he couldn't even do as governor. So completely baseless, factless fear-mongering. Meanwhile, the actual scary thing that's happening in our communities that he contributed to, he has jack shit to say about it. And of course not. And I thought he was the public safety candidate. Weren't his first political ads on TV about how he's going to turn public safety around, despite the fact he was the state's chief law enforcer for the last 12 years and public safety has gotten significantly worse under his watch? But he came out with the TV ads and he all of a sudden wanted to be the public safety candidate. Where's the public safety candidate today? And you might say again, well, what did he do specifically that contributed to this 8-time felon going in and out of prison and killing Ruth Dalton? It's what he didn't do. It's what he hasn't said. Bob Ferguson, and I hate to make this the Bob freaking Ferguson show, but I have to underscore, and these, I know the people watching this show know this, but we'll push out clips. I want them shared far and wide with people who don't know this, who are only seeing what he says, who don't dig for the truth themselves because they've got other things to do. Bob Ferguson refused to speak up when it mattered most. Bob Ferguson, for the last decade, has been one of the most prominent Democrats in the state of Washington, one of the most influential voices in the Democratic Party. And he has sat his happy ass back and he has listened to his party push police defunding, vilify law enforcement, completely ignore left-wing rioters, disorder, and anarchy. He has watched lawmakers in Olympia of his own political party push pro-criminal, anti-public safety policies and not said a damn word about them. And now he wants a promotion. He wants to be governor because he's dreamed a dream of it for so long. And he wants us to suddenly forget that he hasn't had anything to say about these issues for the last decade plus. And I simply refuse to not do everything in my power to try to wake people up to that fact. I'll tell you what, had Bob Ferguson, had Jay Inslee, had they come out in 2020 during the police defunding debate, and had Bob Ferguson stepped forth as the Attorney General and had just another one of the many, many press conferences he loves to do, and said, hey, I am all for, a more equitable system, but we cannot defund the police. We can't do that. I'm all for holding them accountable when they do something wrong, but we can't defund the police. We can't leave our communities with no one to respond when they have a life or death emergency and call 911. We can't outright vilify the police and just blanket vilify them, because what's going to happen? They're going to leave. They're not going to want to work here. He could have said that. He didn't say that. When the legislature went and passed these in the 2021 legislative session, these restrictions on police tactics, including police pursuits, making it almost impossible for police to be able to pursue a violent suspect who would very likely go on to harm the community. Bob Ferguson didn't say anything about that. He didn't say anything about it in 2021. He didn't say anything about it in 2022. He didn't say anything about it in 2023. He only said something about it in 2024 after it was clear that the legislature was poised to adopt a citizen initiative, rolling that law back. And all of a sudden, he's doing an interview with King 5 or Como News or whatever it was, and he's like, oh, I didn't support the rollback of police pursuits in 2021, and I support the initiative that's fixing them. Get a grip. How dishonest is that? And no pushback from that reporter, no pushback to say, well, why didn't you say anything about it publicly then? Why'd you just keep that to yourself? It could have made a difference, right, Bob? The Democrats in Olympia have a lot of respect for you. It could have made a difference if you'd said something about it. Why didn't you say something about it then? So look, I want to bring, and then I'll just note, who did tweet about it immediately? Dave Reichert. Immediately said, I'm praying for Ruth's family. I'm thankful for law enforcement working diligently to arrest a suspect. Stories like this have become too frequent in our state, and I am fed up. Years of unchecked lawlessness and tying the hands of our officers has gotten us to this point. We need change. Yeah, this isn't going to fix itself. Seattle isn't going to fix itself. The party in charge of things here, don't you see that they have had enough chances to make things right? That party has had enough chances to screw things up and change course, to acknowledge past mistakes and move forward. If you don't see that by now, then this is the reality that we're going to have to live with. Because if we don't make a significant shift in the way that we vote, then this is going to be our reality from now into the foreseeable future. Ruth, at 80 years old, she deserved more. Her dog, Prince, deserved more. Everyone in that neighborhood, and I'll say it whether they vote for these people or not, they don't deserve that. Every single person in this state, far left, center, far right, everywhere in between. Every law-abiding person in this state deserves to be able to work, raise a family if they choose, and live feeling safe and feeling secure. And right now, that's not the reality. This is supposed to be one of the most wonderful places to live in the entire world. And the collective we need to help people see that it can be more, that it's not living up to its potential, and that it is getting more dangerous and more devastated by the day. I mentioned on the show yesterday, I really thought, and I've seen over the years here, instances where I thought it would be a turning point, where it's like, wow, that's so bad that people have to wake up. They have to see it, right? CHOP was one of those times where I thought, surely after CHOP, 6 blocks of the city taken over, citizens patrolling with police rifles. I thought that the Democrats hated rifles or whatever it is. And I was like, that's too crazy even for Seattle. Well, apparently not. When Ina Kwan was murdered and her unborn baby killed in downtown Seattle at random, I thought, wow, this has got to, an BIPOC business owner murdered in cold blood, pregnant. This has got to wake people up. Maybe it did for a couple weeks, and then it was like back to normal, business as usual. Ruth Dalton, I know I'm not trying to make her a martyr for anything, in terms of like, I don't want to politicize her death. I guess that's what I mean. That's a better word to use. I don't want to politicize her death. And I'm sure her family doesn't want that either. I don't know. I haven't spoken to them. But I do know that she deserved better. And I do know that nobody would want their loved one's life to end like that. And I do know that there is one party that has contributed to this environment. And I do know that there's only one way to fix that. And you know exactly what that is. So 8-time felon, not a surprise there. But if possible, there's stories in the news yesterday, 25-time felon down in Thurston County. And it's just the same thing. It's like this cyclical, cycle, oh my gosh, revolving door. So down in Thurston County, where there have been multiple stories we've done on the show with Sheriff Derek Sanders of frustration with judges down there. Frustration with judges who are just cutting dangerous offenders loose, low bail, no bail. We've done a million stories about this, but I got to say this is probably the worst one I've heard out of Thurston County. So I'm going to play a clip in a moment from a Como News story. But Sheriff Derek Sanders, he spoke to Como News. He was angry. His deputies had chased a stolen vehicle. They were chasing it on the ground. They were chasing it from the air. They eventually had to kind of back off, for safety reasons. The driver was tracked down, located by K-9 units after he flipped the stolen vehicle. By the way, his girlfriend was a passenger in that stolen vehicle. Turns out the suspect, Brent Rosie, is a 25-time felon. A 25-time felon. Here's a clip from Como News.
So when being transported to the jail, he said that to law enforcement that he'd be out tomorrow, when he was being booked in.
$100,000 was requested of Judge Allison Zip, but the defense attorney argued Rosie has financial limitations and has a baby to care for. So the judge lowered bail to $25K.
I'll be honest, at 25 felony convictions, I don't know why we're still interested in trying to rehabilitate this person. What we should really be interested in at this point is giving our community some relief. You're in prison to give us a break.
Yeah, you're in prison to give us a break. 100%. 25 felonies, that's absolutely ridiculous. Sheriff Sanders says this is an instance of the system absolutely failing.
This is just a complete failure of the criminal justice system.
People will look at this, and the main question is probably going to be, how is this person still out on the street?
I mean, it's a great question. Even I was a little surprised. When I was a community service officer a decade ago, Thurston County deputies were pursuing this guy. My sergeant, who started 25 years ago, was pursuing this guy.
And so now you're saying it's only a matter of time before somebody gets hurt or killed.
Yeah. This individual is someone who has no problem with destroying anything in their path to get away.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, but if you are fleeing at high rates of speed, so much so that you flip your vehicle with a passenger inside, just the act of fleeing from law enforcement shows a disregard for human life. That's a dangerous thing to do, and somebody could be killed. So 25-time felon doing a lot of crimes like this, and the judge is like, that bail request is too high, even though the prosecutor said, you heard the prosecutor in that story say, he was on his way to jail and told the deputies, I'll be out by tomorrow. That is, because he knows that's true, right? He knows that's true. He's been convicted of 25 felonies. No one knows the system better than him, and no one knows what a failure the system has become better than him. So he said, Bray, I'll be out tomorrow. I just flipped a car, ran from police, no big deal. And the judge in this case, by the way, familiar name, Allison Zip. Judge Allison Zip, you might recall in 2023, we had Sheriff Sanders on the show to talk about this judge because there was, and we have the video, there was a police chase, you'll recall, 18-year-old from Puyallup, was driving a stolen car, committed a hit and run on another vehicle, so doesn't care about that vehicle. There's a pursuit, they crash, there's like 5 juveniles in the car with them. They scatter and they find a couple of them in an outhouse, in a porta potty. And then what happened? Released the next day. Released the next day. Just insane. And the request from prosecutors was only $10,000 bail for the driver of that vehicle. That's pretty low if you ask me. Allison Zip released him with no bail. Her only conditions were he has to remain in the state and avoid contact with all his buddies that were in the stolen car with him. But no bail. It's wild stuff. I don't even really know. I don't even really know how to wake people up to that either. I mean, one thing, we have 12 years of Inslee appointees to contend with, and people who were chosen because they're soft on crime. And so judges have the ultimate say and they have the ultimate discretion. And as you know, a lot of judicial races are completely unopposed. So you'll have judges who, well, no one's running against them, even though they're letting people go with no bail, and they're just giving these frequent flyers a slap on the wrist. So you can get everything right on the front end. You can get more police. You could have all that working, going along just fine. Arrests are made, whatever. You could have prosecutors who are prepared to throw the book at someone, and then you get an activist judge in the mix. You're like, well, none of that matters. You think that guy's coming back to court? He has nothing to lose. So at some point, we have to decide what kind of society we want to live in. I just don't have a lot of faith at this point in some of the voters in Washington state. You know, in Seattle, they are clearly willing to put up with a lot of disorder, a lot of crime, a lot of issues, and not vote different for just reasons that don't even make sense to me. You know, they have their, like, I get it as a person who has socially fairly liberal views. I'm more of a hands-off views on social issues. Like, I get it. I care about those things, but they're really not in jeopardy in any way. Now, I'd feel differently if we had a Republican Party here that was far right, that was in power, and that was trying to strip women of their reproductive rights, was trying to ban gay marriage or something. I'd be like, whoa, like, this is nuts. We need to do something about this. That's not what's happening. It's just not what's happening. So you got people who are voting based on the wrong kind of fear, based on fear-mongering from Democrats, just like Bob Ferguson. You've got an 80-year-old woman killed, left for dead in a street, or dog stabbed to death. The fear he's focused on is the fake fear of Dave Reichert will take away your reproductive rights, even though he can't even do that. It's really quite wild to me. It is really, really insane. All right, speaking of Bob Ferguson, so we've been tracking a story all week, and I told you we were going to talk about it today. We'll probably talk about it next week as well. This issue with sexually violent predators. We have talked at length about the Seattle Times expose saying 1 in 4 of the sexually violent predators released from custody on McNeil Island go on to commit other crimes. 1 in 7 commit other crimes that are violent in nature, sometimes similar to what landed them, as sex offenders in the first place. That story, the Seattle Times story, caught the attention of Pete Serrano, who's a candidate for Attorney General. He posted a clip about it on social media.
This past weekend, the Seattle Times broke an article that we should all be shocked about. We should all be paying close attention, and if we're not, we absolutely need to be now. There's no time to wait. We need to look. The article was entitled, "Washington Confined Hundreds for Sexual Violence." Then it quietly began releasing them.
Yeah, so instead of playing his social media clip where he gives his analysis of the situation, we asked Pete Serrano, again, a Republican candidate for Attorney General, the Attorney General's office tasked with dealing with sexually violent predators at McNeil Island. We asked him to come on the show today and react to the story for us. Pete Serrano, welcome back to Undivided.
Hey, Brandi, thanks for having me on again.
Yeah, look, I think you and I agree that what's happening is crazy. I think we'll have a lot of agreement there. I've certainly ranted and railed about this all week on the show. But I want to kind of start by asking you, I think, a conflicting issue here. So we're talking about worst of the worst sex offenders, right? Like, I don't think anybody disagrees with that. But they are Americans. They have constitutional rights. So as Attorney General, I mean, where do you strike that balance between putting someone on an island and never letting them off versus protecting the public?
Well, I think those are two very distinct notions. The notion of never letting them off assumes that these are individuals who can never be rehabilitated or don't have a propensity to reoffend. Ironically, before I saw the story, in fact, at Freedom Fest, I had a gentleman ask me directly about sexual predators or sexual offenders and the rehabilitation process, because he himself claimed to be one. And so I do believe, and I'm not suggesting this is true for violent ones or ones that have high propensity to reoffend, that people can be saved through our incarceration, through our prison facilities. When you look at the Seattle Times article, it has a stark contrast between, it actually cites an individual who went into, and I mentioned this on the video I shot, went into the Walla Walla Penitentiary. In his case, he found Buddha or some sort of higher power that then led him to opening his mind. And in my case, I believe his spiritual element, to saying, hey, look, I need to really become a better person. And then he started taking the treatment. He did the classes. He did everything, worked with therapists. And then he got out and did not reoffend. And I think there's a strong distinction between those who are getting what they need to not reoffend, as opposed to those who go to McNeil and then there's A, no follow-up. B, sometimes we see this in the Times article when the therapist says this person has a propensity to reoffend, and that's ignored by DSHS or DSHS, as well as the AG's office and the parole board. I mean, now to me, it's systematic and systemic from the top down.
Yeah, because it's complicated, because obviously the only person who can technically let them off McNeil Island, if it's contested, is a judge, right? So a judge has to make that determination about whether to end the civil commitment. But, we talked about this story yesterday where you've got a woman, one of the first in the country to be labeled a sexually violent predator, who molested like a little baby and admitted to having many more victims. And she's let off of McNeil twice for under strict supervision. And within a month says she's looking at a 6-year-old girl outside thinking about having sex with her. So they put her back on McNeil, but then within months, she has this trial and a therapist says, well, I can't prove that she would reoffend. So now she's living without any supervision, unconditional release in Spokane. So I guess as the Attorney General, aren't you kind of hamstrung, if I'm giving them all the benefits of the doubt, aren't you kind of hamstrung by what an expert is willing to say in court about someone's propensity to reoffend?
Yeah, but let's question that. I mean, who's your expert? Why are you paying them? Why are you hiring them? What are their qualifications? I mean, I can tell you this just from the work I do at Silent Majority Foundation. I'll bring an expert on, say, a firearms case that will say the exact opposite that the state's experts say. So I'm not suggesting, you pick and choose your experts, but you want to vet them to make sure they're truly qualified. I mean, are we talking about people that say Matt Walsh from, What Is a Woman is bringing on, or these people that are actually looking at the violent propensity of these individuals and looking at the community benefit of releasing or re-releasing them, right? So I think the question is, who are you hiring to say what, and are they truly objective or are they subjective?
Yeah, and the Matt Walsh, for people who aren't familiar, he's got experts who can't tell him what a woman is, right? So the question is, I think, are these kind of activist experts? Because in the case of this woman, again, 1 month on strict supervision, and she's still thinking about and looking at a 6-year-old girl in the neighborhood and admitting that she's thinking about molesting her. And the therapist in that case, according to the Spokesman Review, said, well, she actually showed growth because she didn't actually get sexually aroused by the thought of it. And I'm thinking, if you're admitting that you're thinking about having sex with a child, what do you mean that she's showing growth? It's insane to me. So I guess, if in the Attorney General race, I think this is going to become a key issue, right? For me, it's also an issue for Bob Ferguson, but that's a different race in the race for governor. So what, I guess, would you do differently in your office to truly protect communities from sexually violent predators, both those who you want to keep on the island and those who are going to, through a legal process, get off the island one day?
Yeah, I think it's a couple of notions. One, again, it was very clear in the Times reporting that DSHS and the AG really didn't have a clue of what was happening. And if they did, they ignored it. And so, for one, I will turn my eye onto this rather than turning it away from it, right? So this will be a high priority, making sure that whether it's sexually violent predators on McNeil Island or people that are distributing fentanyl and killing people, or our youth that are having these, gun crises. It's, and it's not, I want to be clear about that. It's not the gun. Kids aren't supposed to have access to firearms. And so where are they getting them? And, so looking at the systemic issues that plague our society of no, we're not tough on crime. I mean, that's really the bottom line. We're not tough on crime. And if we were tough on crime, and so making sure that the team's really digging into these and trying to find the root cause, whether, again, it's the sexual violent predators, okay, maybe we're lacking the right experts. Maybe we're lacking the right treatment. Maybe there are grants from the federal government that we're not looking at. I don't know what all the problems are with Bob Ferguson's office. I just know that there are problems. And for me to shine the spotlight on, hey, we're weak on these elements. We're not just going to spend our time Consumer Protection Act to get chicken checks or tuna checks. We're going to actually protect the people. And some of that will be digging in on hard crime. And so I think that's one change. And then the second change is systematically working the advice and re-advising agencies. Hey, look, when the legislature passes a law through the revised code of Washington, you don't just get to take a Washington annotated code, a whack, and then expand your own authority. That's very clear. I mean, especially with the Chevron deference being struck down, you don't get to rely on your own. You're going to come back to us, and I will flat out tell you when you're exceeding your authority. And if you choose to go ahead and do that, when you get sued, I'm not going to defend it, because my oath is to the U.S. Constitution primarily, secondarily to the Washington Constitution, and tertiarily to the laws of the state. Never does it say the administrative code. And there's no way we should be putting that on a pedestal above anything else. We should be actually working to make sure that all those agencies are within the proper confines of the laws and the Constitution. And so, that will be a big part. If DSHS is failing, let's get them the right advice and tools.
Yeah, I want to follow up on something you said. You said it was clear from the Seattle Times reporting that DSHS or Bob Ferguson's office didn't know what was going on. And if they did know what was going on, they ignored it. Are you referring to the fact that 1 in 4 of these offenders who get off go on to reoffend?
Well, it's not just that, but it actually said that in talking about one of the particular cases that was cited in the article, it said that both the AG's office as well as DSHS were aware, or could have been aware, that the therapist said this individual is actually regressing and not conducting his therapy appointments. And so, if that record's there before these individuals who are either litigating the case, defending the case, or, acting as an administrative agency supervising the case, why are we ignoring the notes? I mean, why pay a therapist if you're just going to say, oh, you're not going to your therapy appointments? Who cares? Well, we'll just let you off anyway. So if we're ignoring, these high red flags, again, simply not showing up, not doing your job, we can't just let folks off in this case of McNeil Island. But I don't think it's just a one-off. I suspect there are many, many other instances of other agencies who are seeing that the fruits of their labor are not aligned with their mission statement or their statutory authority, and we need to peel that back.
Yeah, because and what I would just point out is, Bob Ferguson, they know damn well in the AG's office that more of these offenders have gotten off the island than remain on the island. Like, they know when they lose a case, for instance, or when a sexually violent predator is unconditionally released into a community. So I think for me, the fact that he chooses to multiple times in the past few weeks before this story brag about protecting communities from sexually violent predators, knowing damn well that is not what's happening, is stunning to me. So I look forward to, we've reached out to your opponent, Nick Brown, to see, he's said that he thinks Bob Ferguson has done a good job, that he's set an example and a model. I'm curious if he thinks he's done a good job on this. So we'll ask that question of him. Pete Serrano, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So we appreciate Pete making time for us to give his assessment of the situation. And one of the things he noted there is important. He needs to get in, if he gets into the Attorney General's office, to see what some of their internal procedures have been under Bob Ferguson with cases like this and other things. So, but, he makes a good point. It's kind of the point I made earlier about incarceration. Like, if we're going to have these people on an island, if we're going to have other offenders in prisons, we should be doing everything we possibly can to make sure that they are rehabilitated. And if what we're doing isn't rehabilitating them, if 1 in 4 get off McNeil Island and commit offenses, then not only, is that a problem, and they're obviously very violent and dangerous still, but what are we doing wrong on the island? That it's like a 25% recidivism rate. That's completely unacceptable. So there's some internal soul searching that we need to do and look at our bureaucracy, et cetera, et cetera. So appreciate Pete Serrano's time. And again, we're reaching out to Nick Brown, or maybe already have reached out to Nick Brown, not only for this, but we'd like to interview him about his candidacy, as we have with Pete Serrano. All right, coming up, I promise the rest of the show, we're going to lighten the mood, okay? Rest of the show, we're going to lighten the mood. It's been a really dark, heavy week on Undivided. I absolutely understand that. I appreciate you caring enough to listen to some of this insanely horrible, sad, awful stuff. We're going to lighten the mood the rest of the show. All right, if you're in the market to sell your home, highly suggest you reaching out to our friend Wes Jones, as many Undivided viewers and listeners have. Like, check out a few real estate agents, see what they can do for you, but don't choose one until you've checked out Wes Jones. Our friend Sharona Rhodes, a fan of the show, and her husband, also military veterans, so we absolutely appreciate them. They went to sell their home, but they definitely had some concerns. You know, it needed some upgrades, so Wes Jones used his listing boost concierge service. He fronted them $10,000 and handled all the necessary repairs. But still, Sharona and her husband were a little uneasy, like, oh gosh, we have to pay him that $10,000 back after our home sells. Are we going to get that much out of it? Here's what she told us.
It was a little scary, but he sent us weekly, I think, reports on how home sales were going in our area. So we knew we were on the right track. And so, you know, my husband and I are not big on debt.
Good.
But, you know, we had to be in debt to get the things done that we needed done. So it was just a lot of praying, like, Lord, just please let this happen. And then trusting that Wes knew exactly what he was talking about, and he would come through in the end, which he did.
Yeah, and Wes was able to get their home sold for over list price in just 6 days, which is awesome. So check out Wes Jones, sellwithwes.com, sellwithwes.com. You can start by using their home value calculator to see how much your home is worth. It might be worth more than you think. Sellwithwes.com, a better way to sell your home. All right, a socialist candidate for the Washington State House of Representatives says he needs to look good for his voters. So he thinks he ought to be able to use campaign money for very expensive haircuts. Let's talk about it in our segment, Unbelievable. Boop. All right, credit on this one to Safe Seattle. First of all, you know, you can expense certain things as campaign expenses when you're going about and you're, you know, doing your day-to-day. You can't, I can't believe this has to be said. You can't expense your haircuts. Your haircuts, your hairdos are not a campaign expense. Apparently, that is news to Sean Scott, a socialist who's running to represent the 43rd Legislative District, so a good chunk of downtown Seattle. So the story was broke by Safe Seattle. I'm just going to read their tweet for you because it's funny. I feel pretty, featuring Sean Scott. Someone filed a formal complaint against local socialist candidate Sean Scott for spending campaign donations to the tune of $333 on his expensive hairdo. The complaint stated that, quote, the PDC has previously noted that haircuts are not an allowable campaign expense. Scott responded that he has to look good for the voters and he's going to keep giving his money to Jesus. More on that in a second. Until the PDC tells him not to. Just kidding. It's not Jesus. His barber's name is Jesus, okay? So he's going to keep giving his money to Jesus until the PDC tells him not to. Safe Seattle notes, I think rightfully, if Scott was white, the Seattle Times and other local media would be on this story like body lice on a $2 hooker. Jesus. But in Seattle, one thing you never do is criticize a black guy for what he does with his hair, unless you're Safe Seattle. I actually think that's true, but I'd expand it a little bit. I think the Seattle Times would criticize any candidate if they were a Republican. I think if it were a Republican black candidate, they'd have no problem in the world criticizing them for spending campaign cash, visiting Jesus at the barber shop. But yes, I certainly think that the fact that he is a black man, you know, don't criticize what he does with his hair, etc. But just pulling up the PDC, because you've got to file all your expenditures and stuff. Do men's haircuts cost that much money? There's no way.
Well, I think they can cost that much money. It just depends on your level of expertise, I guess.
And maybe there was some big tips in there.
Oh,
but
I'm
he
sure
puts
there's
it as
big
a
tips. Because if you're not spending your own money, you're leaving a big tip.
Well, you should, right? I
know.
would. But I mean, I just got a haircut and it was $60 It was just a trim and like a little bang framing.
Uh-huh.
And I'm a woman. Look how much hair. I have so much hair. I mean, it's, I got a lot of it.
Yeah.
In the right places. No, sorry. I don't want somebody to pull
gotta
out.
go there.
Well, I know people will take me out of context. Anyway,
Again, for
77, 86, 90. Now he lists so it's all with Jesus at the barbershop in the University District. So the first one that was 77, it says purpose of expense and or description. Candidate styling for campaign video. Like, dude, you're a dude. Female styling, makeup. Maybe if you want to get your makeup done nice for a campaign video, I actually don't have much of a problem with that. But what kind of styling do you need?
Well, I mean, sometimes you could have maybe some specific styling. I don't know if you're,
like I get if you're paying
Kelly Ripa, if you're like Madonna,
you're
or
a state House of Representatives candidate,
right?
But also, then the other ones were labeled public presentation expense. Like, I need to have good public presentation,
right? Or even, I know that I respect black hair. Black hair takes a lot of work sometimes, right? So I respect that if you're getting something done back there, like some braids, like that's going to be expensive.
Yeah, but Sean Scott's hair has looked like that ever since he's been a political candidate. His hair he's been in the political scene forever. His hair has always looked like that. Always. So clearly he's been okay, like finding someone. Maybe it's Jesus. Paying him to get his hair cut, whatever it is. But now it's on the campaign dime. Uh-huh. Oh, maybe now I'm going to run for this isn't his first campaign. So maybe he just runs campaigns so somebody can pay for his haircuts. But you can't do that. So hopefully the PDC comes down hard on him for that, because it is common knowledge that you're not allowed to do that.
And he said he was just going to continue doing it.
Well, that's according to Safe Seattle. But I mean, sounds like that was what they said he said. But the first one, maybe for a campaign video. The rest of them, not so much. Also, I would just note 6'9", 6'17", 6'26", and 7'12".
Oh, yeah.
And again, I don't know if black hair is different, but you're telling me like...
I know it's different, but
like
I don't
8
know
days...
that it grows that fast. 8
days between haircuts? 8. You're telling... No, that's the thing I just noticed.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody tell me. And tell me if you are a black male, because I'm not a black male, do you have to get your haircut every 8 days?
Well, I know Daryl doesn't.
Our Daryl? Well, he's bald. Oh, that's why. Well, I bet he has to shave it quite a bit to keep that. It's hard to upkeep a bald do.
Right.
But every 8 days, 10, that's ridiculous. You know what that is? That's unbelievable.
But you know what? I bet if you're going to a salon that charges that much, you're probably getting the, don't they get the, like the hot cloth, the massage scalp thing? And like, it's probably a whole treatment. And I bet that's why he's like, I need that treatment once a week, so I'll just get my hair cut.
Captain Cranky Pants says that every week he got a haircut every week when he was in the service. That's different.
Right.
That's different. And then he said that that looks like a fade to me. That's $20 at the barber shop I go to. David Poland. Oh my gosh, David, we have some sleuths on our feed. David says Jesus' website says he charges $25. Matthew Cook says $25 is what I pay down in Renton. There's another person, Gear3 Death, Gray Death. Get a haircut every week. Sure, he's not related to Bigfoot. Gets a haircut every week. Sure, he's not related to Bigfoot or a werewolf. Yeah, somebody tell me that it's normal to get a haircut every single week. Unless you're in the military and it has to be like high and tight, or you're bald and you gotta, but you're doing that at home, right? I don't think... Daryl, tell me if you go and get your bald done. My friend Johnny also shaves, but I'm guessing that Daryl shaves his bald at home, because that's what my friend Johnny also does, who went bald a long time ago, and he just shaves that thing at home. Does. He has this little one of these razors that's like, Johnny's one of my best friends of all time. He has this little razor. It's so weird. It's like kind of concave, and it just kind of goes around his head, and he just sort of like shaves it around his head.
Mike's friend Todd has, because when we were at Watershed, he used that at Watershed.
We have a lot of bald male friends, which is cool. I love it. It's like sort of a, what's the bald action movie guy? Statham?
Oh, I'm bad.
Now I'm going to hold on, because I just watched a movie with him yesterday. We're going to move on. But hold on. I want to tell you guys this movie I watched, because I never watch movies. I watched this one at home. It's like Jason Statham, right?
Sounds right.
Yeah. Beekeeper. It was really Jason Statham. It was like a hardcore action movie. I just thought it was interesting. I mean, it was just an action movie. You know, maybe it wasn't even that good, but I watched it and I thought it was good. Anyway, Beekeeper. Okay, what are we doing? Where are we? What's happening? All right, good for you, Sean Scott. Like, look, when I was on Fox,
I think it's the tip.
I had I can say this now. I was not allowed to say it back then because like nobody else got one.
Oh no,
but
you're gonna say it right now?
Why not? Oh. I got a very sizable hair and clothing makeup stipend.
It's all about you talked.
I worked
your
hard.
Contract,
well, look,
right?
Yeah. I worked hard. I justified it. I said, here's why I would like it. And I was given it. So I've been there, but that's like not campaign expenses. So
no,
I had a very nice boss before she left. And then
Can you imagine if you're donating
then I got a very unnice boss.
If you're donating to his campaign, knowing that's where it's going.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. But I do want the discrepancy to be explained. If Jesus' website says it's $25, he must be getting other services while he's there. Maybe a shave or something, but he's got the he's got the 5 o'clock shadow.
If it's not your money, then why not just thank him with a big giant tip?
I guess. All right, unbelievable. Moving on. Coming up this weekend, August 24th and 25th, Natchez RV Resort is having their Phase 2 grand opening. So they have 18 extra large RV lots starting at just $79,900. That's the grand opening weekend pricing. And this place is awesome. I mean, first of all, there's 300 days of sunshine out there, so that's just great to get away from the doom and gloom and craziness of Seattle. But if you've got an RV and you want like a place where it is pull in, plug and play, or where you can leave your RV, and they actually have a program where they can rent out your space, etc., so you can make some money back on it if you're not using it all the time. But man, they just opened their 4,300 square foot clubhouse. So if you're at another RV lot and you want family to come over, like there's nowhere to really hang, right? I mean, you can, I guess, put out your folding chairs and hang in front of the RV, but this is beautiful. They've got all this space to hang out, gourmet kitchen, indoor-outdoor fireplace. They're just finishing their pool, hot tub. They've got pickleball courts, dog park, all of these things. It really is a cool, first class RV resort. So make sure that you make a reservation if you want to go out and check it out this weekend during the grand opening pricing. NatchezRVResort.com. NatchezRVResort.com. Okay, a reminder, this weekend we are having an event. Well, it's not really our event. We're just invited to it, and I was told that I could also invite you to it. So why wouldn't I? Rally at the Ranch happening at the Merton Ranch in Toledo. Everyone is welcome. It doesn't cost anything to get in. You just bring your lawn chairs. There's going to be special guests, including yours truly. Nicole is also going to be there. Joe Kent, Raul Garcia, Jamie Herrera Butler, Phil Fortunato, Dave Olson, Matthew Hawkins. Jim Walsh, Pete Serrano are going to be there. It's happening again this Saturday, August 24th in Toledo. Starts at 6 p.m. Doors open at 4 p.m. Bring a chair. There's food trucks on site, and the featured speaker will be none other than gubernatorial candidate Dave Reichert. And I imagine that he is going to have something to say about some of the news that has happened.
And by the
this
way,
week.
You don't have to be from Toledo.
Why
I saw somebody respond to your tweet on that saying, oh, there's like 200 people in Toledo. That's going to really make a difference in the votes.
I'm guessing that was a troll who doesn't use their real name or picture.
But I mean, it's a little town, and that's what we love about it. Like,
yeah, but there's a lot of towns around there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you're in
the left,
I know,
condescending.
Vancouver. Yeah. Come on up.
Look, we had people come out from the peninsula for Freedom Fest last weekend. Our friend Rick came out from the peninsula, and so people will travel, especially if you've got an opportunity to hear from candidates and they might not be coming to your area anytime soon. So come out, hang out with us.
I actually don't think it was a troll because he says that ought to tip things Reichert's way, which is your language. I feel like ought.
Yeah, but couldn't he still be trolling me?
Maybe, but
and also he's clearly being
sarcastic.
Facetious. Is that the word?
Yeah.
Facetious.
Anyway,
I might have not used that word in the appropriate sense.
It made me kind
holy
of laugh
smokes.
when I
We have a lot still to go. We got Jonathan Cho from the DNC.
Yeah,
that's exciting. So let's get to that, shall we? So our friend Jonathan Cho with Discovery Institute also is a contributor to Frontline USA. He is at the DNC this week. He's been outside the DNC doing what he does best, dealing with the far left people who are crowding, protesting, doing all. And look what who he ran into? Shama Sawant, not once but twice.
Ms. Sawant, how you doing? Did you leave Socialist Alternative? Did you leave Socialist Alternative? Shama Swans, how you doing? Jonathan Cho, here from Seattle. Hey, do you still regret not running for city council? Do you want to come back? Ms. Sawant, why are you here in Chicago? What is the plan this week at the DNC? Does Ms. Sawant want to talk?
I love how Shama always has blockers. Like, no, you can't talk to her. You know, oh, we're going to block you with our little sign. Like, it's going to work.
Backpacks.
And it just, poor Shama, like, she goes halfway across the country and still can't get away from Jonathan Cho. Anyway, there's a lot going on outside the DNC, especially tonight. There might be some unrest from the far left. So Jonathan Cho was nice enough to take time to fill us in on everything that's happened this week so far. Or not. Jonathan Cho, welcome back to Undivided.
Hey, Brandi.
You are just a bundle of fun over there. Shama Sawant, I'm shocked she runs away from you because I thought she loved attention.
Yeah, she usually does in Seattle, but I think I've asked her and rather confronted her way too many times now. So I saw her not once but twice here this past week at the DNC, and she is out here with the far left activists pushing her Marxist socialist agenda.
Yeah, there's definitely a socialist element and agenda there. So talk a little bit about what they're doing, because she is not a fan of the Democratic Party. She's said it a million times. She thinks they're just as bad as Republicans, essentially, in her mind. So what are the socialists doing there?
Yeah, well, give her credit for that. Even during her time on the Seattle City Council, she's been pretty consistent, right? She's never really, shown any allegiance to a particular party. She's always been about her own socialist and working class agenda. So basically, Sawant is here joining up with everyone else outside protesting the DNC. And like you said, Brandi, they hate both sides. They hate Trump and they also hate Harris. And what's happening now is that there's also a beef going on, apparently, at least according to this manifesto that's been floating around online, where Sawant has now parted ways with Socialist Alternative. This was her national group, the national attempt to really push her, union agenda, working class agenda. Now she's with another group called Workers Strike Back. So I did go to one of those meetings, and she's pretty much on brand as usual, talking about the need to get rid of capitalism. She's against free market capitalism, against the big corporations, and a lot of people here at the national stage in Chicago are listening now.
Yeah, well, a couple things. So what's her beef with the Socialist Alternative? Because it sounds like she's just advocating for the same things, but she's just not as a member of Socialist Alternative.
Yeah, it seems like Socialist Alternative, first of all, it seems like there could be some financial issues there. She's alleging that they're not being, it's not being used properly. But at the same time, and more importantly for her, she feels like, at least according to this manifesto, they're not being effective enough, maybe more militant as she would like. So she decided to start a new group, or at least align with this group called Workers Strike Back. They have banners out here, they have placards, and they're out here marching, joining up with the pro-Hamas crowd and everything else that's under the sun outside the DNC.
Yeah, we'll get to the pro-Hamas crowd and what's happened so far, maybe is expected to happen this evening. But you said it seems like, these socialist sort of workers fight back people are getting some attention, but like, at the same time, inside, you've got some of the richest people in America who are headlining the DNC. Oprah, the governor of Illinois, who's a billionaire. I mean, the Obamas, who are multimillionaires. So I guess, like, square that with this, like, we're for the workers and, down to rich people mentality.
I mean, that's why Sawant has a point, right? And that's kind of the point she's trying to make at the national stage, whether it's the Republican National Convention or Democratic National Convention this week. She's saying that both parties are compromised with rich people, essentially, who care more about their own interests and, bottom line profits over the working class or the will of the people. So again, that message, you don't hear that much inside. A lot of the chants, a lot of the meetings, a lot of the caucusing happening outside the DNC.
Yeah. So let's talk about the pro-Palestine. Some, I would say, are blatantly pro-Hamas. I don't know if it was you that took a picture of it, or you shared a picture of some older gentleman with a sign that said, like, down to Israel, arm Hamas, or disarm Israel, arm Hamas, or something like that. So tell me what you're seeing with that particular crowd outside the DNC.
Look, for our Seattle audience, this is pretty much the same crowd that has been marching and protesting in Seattle on October 7th and across the nation. This is the same crowd that fueled some of the campus protests. You had people now who've been bussed in and flown in from all over the U.S. to descend upon Chicago right now to push the same agenda: free Palestine, free Gaza. But also you're hearing about reproductive rights as well. You're hearing about immigration rights. So you have pretty much everyone under the sun, along with the troublemakers, Antifa, the anarchists, who try to latch on to these movements anytime there's any, chaos, opportunities for chaos or, destabilizing society, they take advantage of that. So it's complicated right now, to say the least, Brandi.
Yeah, I heard chants of like, it was like Harris is a murderer or something like that. And I'm thinking, well, that's not good for them inside the DNC. It's sort of similar. We have rifts in the Republican Party. This is certainly a rift in the Democratic Party. To what extent have these led to serious security issues?
Well, first of all, one of the favorite chants out here for Kamala Harris is now Holocaust Harris. So you can tell, again, how they feel about her. But all 3 days now, and of course, tomorrow's the final day, today's the final day of the DNC. I've lost track of the days now, Brandi, but every single day, there's been some type of protest or social unrest. The first day, you had the activists who tried to tear down and actually did remove some pieces of the security perimeter around the United Center where the Democratic National Convention is happening, where all the main speakers take the stage. And then on day two, you had another massive mob in front of the Israeli consulate. And that was the day where, police arrested more than 70 people. Unfortunately, nobody was charged, though, believe it or not, and just simply released again. And then yesterday we had another massive protest. No arrests yesterday, but you get the theme here, right, Brandi? And tonight, on this final day of the DNC, we're now expecting an even larger protest. So we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, and I heard uncommitted delegates are upset and, because they're not given a stage. And some of those uncommitted delegates are there from Washington State, people who didn't necessarily support Harris. They want to be heard. But I don't know if it's changed or if you've heard anything, but I've heard that there's not going to be any changes to the lineup to accommodate them.
They're asking for a speaker of Palestinian descent, right? And they feel like nobody is being represented there. So there's actually a sit-in within the perimeter of the DNC right now. Representative Ilhan Omar from Minnesota has also shown up to show her support for this small group. But there's protests happening inside now and protests happening outside.
Yeah, can I just end it on, I don't know if you saw this, but it was hilarious. There's this social media personality who actually brought a migrant from Venezuela to try to get into the DNC. He came across the border illegally, and there's that wall they built, the fence wall essentially around the DNC, and he couldn't get the undocumented migrant through the wall into the DNC. He had to have ID and all of this paperwork and stuff. And so it's just this funny point about you don't mind them coming across our southern border, but the security outside the DNC is much tighter. So,
yeah, that's the irony or the hypocrisy. And they made a point that this is the exact type of fencing, this 2-layer fencing, where there would be one, first line of defense, then a no man's land, and another second fence if, they got through, as an idea that Trump pitched. So again, the Democrats are now using all of Trump's ideas, it appears.
Yep, just at the DNC. All right, Jonathan Cho, please be safe tonight. And thank you so much for your reporting from the DNC.
See you back in Seattle.
There you have our friend Jonathan Cho. You can follow all his activity at Show on X. Also check him out at Discovery Institute's Wealth and Poverty Center. They do a lot of reporting on the homeless crisis, etc. But Cho managed to just find the left-wing rioters wherever he goes, or maybe he seeks them out. Who knows? But we appreciate him filling us in. All right, it is Thursday. I know we're having a long show. It's fine. It's our last show of the week, and I have to spend 3 days without you guys. Well, technically, I see subscribers on Sundays, but it's Thursday. That means it's time to check in on what's happening with my sister in the Sunshine State. It is our segment, Florida Report.
It's not even controversial anymore.
People know in Florida their freedoms are going to be respected.
Miranda, happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday.
Yeah, we got a good trio of stories out of Florida. First, this is the headline from Politico. DeSantis' takeover of Florida school boards has a big setback. What is it?
The setback is he had endorsed a solid 23 candidates for school board. And as of last night, after the elections where the results were coming in, at least 11 of those have lost. I don't think that's a huge setback. I think balance is beautiful. So if half of them don't win, then that just creates a nice little divide of half and half, which I think is important in politics. So
yeah, I love how they act like it's some unusual, nefarious thing, Oh my gosh, a governor endorsing school board candidates and he wants a conservative takeover. I mean, he probably does want a conservative takeover, but it's like, okay, half won, half lost. What's the big deal? I don't get the headline.
Well, and a few years ago, he had endorsed 30 people and only 5 lost. So I think they're probably just comparing it to what maybe the atmosphere was a few years back when he had endorsed a whole bunch of them before. So
yeah, and then this was also, I think we talked about this last week. Don't they in Florida, they're considering changing it so that you have a political party next to your name when you're running for school board? They haven't done that yet though, right?
no, that will be on the ballot coming up in the elections in November. That's going to be when people can decide whether or not they want to know school board candidates' party affiliation starting in 2026 and moving forward. So,
yeah,
I mean, it's not like they don't already have, it's like set the tone where you don't already obviously know what they are, but now it'll actually make it official where they can mark what their political identity is when they're running.
Yeah, and whether that would help or hurt Republican-backed candidates, I don't really know. I mean, Florida is a red state right now, but it obviously has some deep blue areas, and just like, you know, Seattle, it's going to be harder to get a conservative candidate on a school board than it is in Eastern Washington. So, yeah, I agree. Balance is, what'd you say? Balance is beautiful.
Balance is
It's fine, except if the balance is like sane people versus cuckoo, like, let me talk to you about gender ideology. That's not balance. That's just lunacy. All right. This is these headlines today. It's interesting because like any headline about anything in Florida that like DeSantis or conservatives might be involved in is like the biggest fearmonger, like Florida bad. And it just is so indicative of how the media covers anything conservative. But from the Associated Press, Florida quietly removes LGBTQ plus travel info from state website. What info did they remove?
So Florida, I think if most people have been here, they know Florida has a lot of cities that are big tourist destinations for the LGBTQ plus community. We have, you know, between Pride and just some other kind of celebrations we have in Florida throughout the year, some of these cities like really depend on a lot of tourism from these groups of people. So during certain times of the year, but there was a full LGBTQ plus travel page that just talked about the best cities, events, just anything that geared towards something that they might want to travel down here and take part in. And they removed that section from the website at some point. Nobody really knows when. A reporter kind of just was checking on it and it suddenly wasn't there. But the reporter also said that if you use the search bar, that information still comes up. There's just not a dedicated spot on the Florida tourism website anymore for it.
And look, I don't understand. It's a government website. Like, why are you putting out info that caters to people based on who they want to have sex with? Like, I don't get it. But also, there's nothing stopping cities from doing that, right? I mean, I guarantee Miami Mayor Francis Suarez, who's a Republican, very moderate, I guarantee that they are still going to push out information for Pride Month and let people know, you know, this is a safe, awesome place, inclusive place to come. So there's nothing that would prohibit that, right?
No, not at all. And I think a lot of these events and a lot of these weekends that kind of cater to those communities, there's promoters and stuff that are completely separate entities from the state or any form of government that through social networking and other, you know, media outlets are putting out advertisement for this stuff. So I don't think that it should be up to really the state to promote any sort of like, it's, you know, Ultra Music Fest, which is like an EDM weekend in Miami. Yeah. You know, if you're into certain things, I think that there's plenty of places online to find out when, where, what, how, besides a tourism website for the state. So.
Yeah. And look, gay people know that they're welcome in Miami and in places in Florida. Like, they know, okay? I don't know one gay person who like decides where to travel based on what the state tourism website tells them. That doesn't make any sense to me. All right, there are some people acting outraged. This is from WESH Channel 2, because they're saying that Florida is trying to like turn state parks into tourism hotspots and dropping hotels and golf courses and just ruining nature. And you say that's not the case.
No, that's not the case. So the Florida Department of Environmental Protection released its 2024-2025 Great Outdoors Initiative, which is basically just a plan that they put public on what they plan to do with some of these state parks to try to bring in more revenue, bring in more tourism, bring in more, and also get Floridians out of their house and into the wild of Florida. A lot of these headlines say they're going to put golf courses and hotels. So the Department of Environmental Protection took to X, formerly known as Twitter, yesterday to correct and really lay out more details of their plan, which basically includes adding more cabins and overnight accommodations to a lot of these parks, because Florida is beautiful and people are booking all the time, every day, all of these overnight accommodations almost months out. So people can't like really even participate. So they're like, we're going to add more cabins, more glamping sites, more camping sites, not like a Marriott or anything like that. They're not going to like pave paradise and put up a parking lot. But then in regards to the pickleball courses, they're going to just use some like overflow parking that never gets used and add pickleball courses to them. So they're not going to be, paving over anything that's like already there. I mean, their main goal is to protect the environment. They just want to generate some more revenue in order to like put it back into conservation efforts. And I think that that's totally fine.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. Pay paradise and put up a parking lot. It's the first thing I thought of. That's literally what they're making it seem like. Marriott's a good. Oh, I'm surprised they didn't say they'll probably put Trump hotels in there and Trump golf courses. So, Miranda, thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Have a good week.
It's not even controversial anymore.
People know in Florida their freedoms are going to be respected.
That's a good jam, though. Pay paradise. I don't know if I know any other words. And put up a parking lot. Whatever. Yeah. Nicole's not.
That's pretty much what I know too.
So that's it. No, don't it always seem to go that you don't know what it got till it's gone. Pay paradise and put up a parking lot. Anyway, okay. So Kamala Harris headlining the DNC tonight, obviously. And it's kind of awkward. There's a couple things that are awkward about it to me, about the whole way they did things. First of all, they put some of the most wonderful orators that the Democratic side has before her. Like, to me, she's not a particularly strong speaker. Better when she has a prompter, which she will tonight, but like Barack Obama. Oh, let's have Barack Obama, go before her. And it's like, well, now I got to compete with that. And even Pete Buttigieg, I mean, they're very, very good speakers. And so anyway, so she has to deal with that side of it, right? But also this weird dynamic. Joe Biden starts out the week talking about how wonderful the economy is. Meanwhile, we're just a few days off from Kamala Harris introducing this big plan to save the economy, to like save Americans. And then you had the job downgrade, like 800,000 fewer jobs were actually created than previously thought. So that happened between Joe Biden, economy's just great, I did such a good job, jobs report, bad news. And then what is Kamala Harris going to say tonight? I mean, either she's probably going to have to go against Biden a little bit because she just had that big rollout, the jobs report, whatever. So we asked our friend Zach Abraham with Bulwark Capital, like, how can people make sense of this? You got two people in the same party on the same stage who are talking about two very different realities.
Yeah, a couple things. First of all, just as a side note, I think the biggest slam I have ever seen the DNC throw at Biden, including kneecapping him and pushing him out of there, was slating him when they did.
Yep.
I mean, I don't feel bad for him or his family. Like they get everything they deserve, in my opinion. But what a slap in the face. Yeah. I mean, ouch. The sitting president goes first on the first night.
And then at like midnight Eastern time.
Yeah, that was brutal. Mm-hmm. Look, we could get into a bunch of different parts of this. What the average American should think, regardless of their political affiliation, is this is what happens when you quit having a free and independent media, right? The ability to sit up there and say those two things that are in complete conflict with each other. The ability for Harris to sit there and say at a political rally, we're going to get the border secured. What have you been doing for the last 4 years? Yeah. That's your job, right? You can't play. We're not kicking the bums out and bringing you in here. You're currently in the seat, lady, I like to attack things from that angle because I think so many of these things just get chalked up to bipartisan bickering and all that kind of stuff. Go look at the proposals she rolled out. Those aren't democratic proposals. They're communist.
Yep.
These policies have failed everywhere in the world they have ever tried, and they didn't just not work. Whenever they were used, policies just like this directly led to 40 million people in China starving to death under Mao Zedong's rule. And the fact that, like, I want to look at people who go, hey guys, can we all take a break on the political rhetoric? You are committing political suicide right now. Okay, this isn't about right or left. This is about insanity and common sense.
Yep.
And what's sad is that, 25, 30 years ago, everyone would have been like, no, come on, we can't do cost controls. That makes everything more expensive, right? It also brings about black markets. It brings around scarcity of goods. I mean, if you want to know what cost controls look like, go Google Soviet Union grocery stores. You had a bunch of cost controls. And it's really, really simple, Brandi. It's not an ideological issue. If we put cost controls on anything, okay, what we are doing is we are taking out the potential for the most or highest margin periods of times. Meaning, when you drill an oil field, you're not drilling it because you're going to get $70 oil. You drill it because sometimes you're going to have to sell at 45, but the counterbalances to that is sometimes you're going to sell at 120 to 130, right? If you take away the upper bound, you will see anything they do this to, you will see the production and manufacturing of that good fall through the floor. Why? Because investment into that sector will stop. And it's not political, right? This is just supply and demand dynamics. And we keep building bad blocks upon bad blocks, expecting a new block's going to fix it. And you go, no. Guys, there is no way around this. You don't get to usurp the law of supply and demand. You just don't.
They can sure try, though. She might. That's Zach Abraham with Bulwark Capital. You can check out his radio show, knowyourriskradio.com, knowyourriskradio.com. Investment advisory services offered through Trek Financial LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Investments involve risk and are not guaranteed. Past performance doesn't guarantee future results. Trek 24308. Go to knowyourriskradio.com. All right, let's get to our daily subscriber show poll, which will lead us into some pretty good questions today and comments. If I do say so myself, you guys are just smart. All right, the daily subscriber show poll on Patreon, Locals, and X. What number of felony convictions, if any, should result in an automatic lifetime prison sentence? And this, of course, harkens to the top story of the day, the 80-year-old woman in Seattle murdered by an 8-time felon. So I asked you, should it be 3, 5, or is setting a number simply too arbitrary? You guys are in disagreement depending on what platform. On Patreon and Locals, most of you are saying that setting a number is too arbitrary. On X right now, the folks who've taken the poll there say 3, like 3 strikes, you're out. I had someone, this is a really good question, Eric on Patreon, say, I was just wondering about that. Whatever happened to 3 strikes and you're out? Well, Washington State still does have a 3 strikes law, actually, but what people don't realize is it's not for every felony. So there are only certain felonies, like the most violent of the felonies, that actually count toward 3 strikes. And the legislature actually softened that law. You might recall in 2021 when they were pushing all this anti-police animus, pro-criminal. So what they did in 2021 is they eliminated robbery in the second degree as a contributor to 3 strikes. So that was for moving forward. So previously, before that law went into effect, if you committed robbery in the second degree, that was a strike. After that law went into effect, it's not a strike. And they also had to look at resentencing offenders who were only serving life without parole because they had a robbery in the second degree conviction. So some of them had their sentences re-examined. And so that's just, I remember covering it at the time. That seemed very arbitrary. It's like, okay. So the issue, and what a lot of law enforcement argued at the time, if memory serves me correctly, is, okay, their conviction might be for robbery in the second degree, but we know that a lot of these cases are pled down. So for a lot of them, they had robbery in the first degree, they got a plea deal, and the plea deal allowed them to avoid a strike. So does that really make a lot of sense? Let's see some of your other comments on this. Debbie said, also, you don't have to, I just lost you. Also, you don't have to do a violent criminal act to receive a felony. So the answer to that poll should be case by case basis. Let's see. Rick Seattle would love to have clarified who The individuals or extreme activist groups are promoting our current criminal treatment standards. I don't think the majority of our Dems in office personally agree, and definitely not enough to create majority support if the parties didn't vote as blocs. Seems there are very influential groups and individuals, which I believe are a tiny minority. Gosh, I don't know if it is a tiny minority anymore within the Democratic Party in our state. We have a very progressive Democratic Party. And it also depends on where the political winds are blowing. So, for instance, there was much more of an appetite for criminal justice reform in 2020, 2021 than maybe there is now. So you definitely have a lot of Democrats, and I'm not saying Republicans don't blow with the wind either, but you have a lot of Democrats that will do what that fringe, loudest sort of vocal, maybe a minority of their party wants them to do, but, you know, is they're willing to protest, they're willing to attack you, whatever it is. They're willing to shut down city council meetings until they get their way. But it definitely is a matter of just blowing with political winds. Kamala Harris is a great example of this. Remember when she ran for president in 2020, you know, when she got like, what, 2%? Remember that she was trying to distance herself from her record as a prosecutor. Why? Well, because the criminal justice system was being called into question and the far left didn't like that she was a prosecutor and she put people in prison. But what is she doing now? Just 4 years later, she's like, I'm the prosecutor. You know, she's running as the tough on crime prosecutor. 4 years apart, totally different stance. So it really just depends on, you know, what's happening. A lot of the laws passed in 2021 around criminals in this state, I don't believe that they necessarily would have passed this latest legislative session. Maybe, but there was certainly more of an appetite for it then. Michelle Maddox, she says it really depends on the crime committed. Let's see. Let me grab a couple more here. One from X. Woozy says, of course, I hope you're not woozy. Of course, violent felonies and especially acts against children and the elderly should be first time straight to jail for 20 years or life, and absolutely in general population. Oh, Gen Pop in prison, like no special treatment. That always bothered me. I mean, it's the job of DOC and it's a liability issue, right? You to have inmates who are killed in prison or sexually assaulted in prison or whatever that is. And so it is their job to keep them safe. And even if it's a sex offender or something and you don't care if they're safe, that becomes a liability issue. If they're murdered behind bars because whatever lacks security, then we're going to end up paying the family of a pedophile millions of dollars, and we don't want that either necessarily. All right, some other questions or comments. Let's see, some super chats. H, a $10 super chat. Is there anything we can do for Ruth's family? We'll let you know if we see some sort of GoFundMe come up. I think just praying hard for them and, you know, sharing this story and recognizing, you know, the loss there. And I know there was a memorial down where she was killed, where people were leaving flowers. So Matt Gilbert with a $10 super chat. We have tried nothing and we're all out of ideas. Washington politicians, probably. Bill with a $20 super chat. It says the message was retracted. Did Bill not leave a message with his super chat?
Well, he retracted it.
Oh, well, I wonder what it was.
I know.
Oh, no, that's very mysterious, Bill. Matthew Cook with a $10 super chat. It notified me it's your 20th super chat, so thank you. It's for the Brandi Kruse hair stipend. What about Nicole? That's not cool. Nicole spends way more on her hair than I do.
That's probably true.
100%. I get like 2 haircuts a year. More when I had a bob. And then I let it grow out for the most part. Like I'll get the little, what is it called? A balayage? Which is ridiculously expensive. It's like $500 for somebody with my, I have really thick, long hair, obviously. And, but I'll get it once and I won't do it again for 2 years. Like you can't even tell. Look.
Yeah, it just kind of
fades in. Yeah. So I'm actually fairly low maintenance.
Twice a year too. But
yeah, you like fly someone in to do your hair, don't you?
Well, if my friend can't come here, then occasionally I've gone to Indiana.
To get her hair done. Who's the diva now? Who'd you think was the diva between the two of us? Nicole literally flies across the country to get her hair done because she only likes how one person does it. Maybe two.
It's true.
That's very funny. Shamalama Ding Dong with a $4.99 super chat. Hey, Brandi, I'm getting my board license in forensic psychology. I can't imagine passing her in an assessment. Just ridiculous. Talking about the female sex offender who gets off McNeil Island, and 1 month later, she admits to staring at a 6-year-old girl in the neighborhood out her window and having fantasies about molesting her. And then within a year, she's out on unsupervised release. Yeah, okay, got it. So, D-Man in Seattle, it's just too hard for people to admit they were wrong, so they will never vote differently. And it's a little bit of brainwashing. It is. You can be brainwased.
I actually think it's a lot of brainwashing.
It's a lot of brainwashing. Just look at Bob Ferguson. Look what he's trying to drive fear into the hearts of people over. And look, Republicans can absolutely be brainwashed. I think the Trumpism, to some extent, borders on brainwashing sometimes when, like, people won't acknowledge that he has faults. There are certainly a segment of Trump supporters who like, oh, no, January 6th was fine, or he does this, and he does this. I mean, I'm voting for Trump, like, don't get me wrong, but you also have to acknowledge, like, he does have some flaws. He does have some faults. He doesn't always say or do what he should. So this idea of, like, this, my party can't do anything wrong and, like, there's nothing they could do better is a ridiculous belief, no matter who has it.
It is, although I think that the brainwashing goes deeper than that, and it's this: people don't assign blame where blame is due, right? So they've convinced everybody that they're helpless in this situation and they can't do anything to change it. And so everybody just has this. I mean, I was talking to somebody and I said, aren't you tired of this, this, and this? And he says, yeah, but that happens everywhere. Why do you think it happens everywhere?
Yeah. Or in those specific places.
So frustrating.
You hear that a lot when, I'm sure there are some tweets responding to my posts about Ruth, where they're like, well, there's violent crime happens in all major cities. It's like, okay, but you're right, where it's like this, oh, we've just resigned ourselves to this. No, this is
humanity now.
Yeah, this is an 8-time felon with mental health issues. And if you really think that, there's nothing more we could have done for him, or there's nothing more the system could have done to protect people like Ruth from him, that's sad. I feel bad that you're that, like, either feel that helpless, or you have, like, that
hope for humanity,
those low of expectations, I guess, for those who are supposed to serve us and make our system function. It's really bad. And also, I
don't think it's very humane to just give this guy what he needs, as in drugs and a place to live or whatever it is. They're just feeding him all of these terrible things that just make his problems worse, instead of actually finding help for this guy.
I should just read this really quick because it came up and we were also messaged about it, but Ari Hoffman put up a story saying sources told him Jamad Haynes, the prolific offender who's accused of killing Ruth Dalton, was a resident of a nearby wet house that gives drugs and alcohol to homeless residents like room service, all funded by Seattle. So that is going to be the next element of this story. And I was wondering where he lived and how he afforded an apartment on Capitol Hill.
And why they weren't really looking for him. They weren't giving us any details on him. They knew
who he was, right? So he was, according to Ari Hoffman's sources, and actually we got the same information from a source just before we came on, so we didn't have time to sort of dive into it, he was living in a wet house where the taxpayers fund it to make sure he gets drugs and booze and whatever he needs in there, because apparently that's, like, helpful. It's truly insane. So maybe we'll have some more follow-up on that next week. Let's see here. Julia Hoagland. I hope Ruth's family files a lawsuit against prosecutors in the state. Maybe the release of these people who are a danger to the public will stop if they win the lawsuit. B. Larson. Hate is a strong word for my feelings, conservative as they are, but I can agree when it comes to both sides being really messed up these days. Let me see here. Scott, or is it on? Sean Scott.
Yes.
My Cup of Tea 101 says, I have dreads and reduce my cost by going 2 or 3 times a year for maintenance I may have missed. Yeah, dreads are easier to sort of go. I'm not allowed to have dreads because I'm a white woman, and apparently that's cultural appropriation. Who there's, like, I don't know, people who have been, like, criticized for that.
You
whatever.
Can't even get your hair braided when you go to Mexico anymore.
I have pictures that will surface if I ever run for office one day of me with my hair braided in Mexico.
Yeah, I mean, humidity is a B word.
It was
to
also
people like us.
It was long before people would have lost their mind about that. But yeah, I guess two times a year, you're about low maintenance like me then. On the DNC, Crafty Grandma Crispy, I find it hilarious that they have a fence around the convention center and people must show ID to be admitted. That's more secure than our border, 100%. Mama Pillow, I watch Jonathan Cho's YouTube channel and never see his face. Nice to have him here. Yeah, because he's always behind his camera causing trouble. Rick Johnson will end with you. Government is the problem, not the solutions. We have to minimize it to defend essential services. We have to minimize it to the defined essential services. Yeah, I agree. And look, like, more and more every day, I'm like, I need to carry a gun. Because who's going to protect me? I am very also, and I'm sure you guys are too, hyper aware of my surroundings. It doesn't matter where I am, how comfortable, especially after that guy pulled a knife on me. Very aware, like, in and out of the grocery store, like, always, like, head on a swivel. And that's a sucky way to live. It's a smart way to live, right? But I mean, it's just insane. I feel so horrible for that. All her friends, all her family, everybody in that neighborhood. It's just awful stuff. All right. Good comments per the usual. And with that, half hour into overtime, let's get to our closing sanity check. It's a little weird. We're getting our closing sanity check from Chris Cuomo today, which I think he started to redeem himself from his CNN days. It's making me really think that he was totally infected with like CNN brainworm over there, and now we're seeing who he actually is, because it seems like he's being more authentic. So he's at the DNC, on the floor of the DNC, and we're going to leave this whole, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like 2.5 minutes, but it's really good, and I want you to hear it. Where he is making this point about, like, you've got Oprah, billionaire, up on stage talking about, you know, income inequality, and the same with Michelle Obama saying, my mom said it was never right to take more than you need. It's like, what are you talking about? And then they're going to fight against the rich people. But in reality, for both parties, the reality of both parties and our political system, as Chris Cuomo, someone who would know, having a political family, as he points out in this clip.
A big theme here at the DNC is that they're going to go after corporate gouging. And they're going to go after corporations, whether it's in taxes, largesse, loopholes. The RNC, we heard the same thing. They're going after the elites, the two sets of rules. Let me reveal a reality to you that has to be spoken to here, okay? These are the soldiers. These are the men and the women that go back to their constituencies and their communities, and they fight. They take time from their jobs. They take time from their families. Republicans and Democrats alike, that's what they do. They need to charge these people up. They need to be able to get them on board. But there's another reality that is literally looking down on them. Greg, look at the ring of sweets, okay? This is not unique to Democrats. There is a game of money. When people talk about uniparty, we are strangled by the money reality in our politics. Those suites start at 500 grand. You think there's like a teacher group up in there? You think it's like the Cub Scouts of Columbia County, South Carolina, that's up in those boxes? Some of them are lobbies and good things. The media boxes, you think they're free? Why do you think I'm on the floor? News Nation is not a broke company. Nexstar is a massive organization. We are corporate media. We don't have one of those boxes because that's the game. You pay to play. Those boxes are filled with the same people that they say they're going to regulate. They are literally looking down on the faithful and being told, yeah, we're going to break down on them. We're going to make them pay their share. They paid $500, $700, $1 million, $1.5 million to have those seats. They get hotel suites that are probably gifted to the party. And the same thing is true with the Republican side. And they're going to take them down. They're going to change how it is. They are looking down from on high at the people who make the difference in their communities. And that is the reality of politics. And I had my producer walk around and show you those suites. Now, they're not all the same. They're not all the same. But the reality is, in 2000, they spent $300 million on presidential campaigns. 24 years later, you know what they're expected to spend? $10 billion. Do you know how much money Harris has raised in the last couple of weeks? Hundreds of millions. And that's success. A lot of it's small donor, a lot of it isn't. The most dangerous money in politics is now legal money because of Citizens United. You've got to know this. The idea that they can fight against it is almost laughable. It's almost laughable. So look and listen when you are told these things. Because I don't care what they promise you. Not here tonight, not at the RNC, not that Trump knows them, not that they don't own them. He did one of the biggest fundraisers I've ever heard of in my life out where I live. Millions of dollars a plate. That's the reality of politics.
Chris Cuomo, ladies and gentlemen. New and improved Chris Cuomo. That has been your sanity check for today. That has been today's episode of Undivided. Remember, we would love to see you this Saturday in Toledo at the Merton Ranch. 1011 Tucker Road in Toledo. We're going to be there for the rally at the ranch. You can hear from me. You can meet Nicole and I, other political candidates who are going to be there, with the featured speaker being gubernatorial candidate Dave Reichert. Bring your lawn chairs. There's food trucks available. Event starts at 6 p.m. I'll make sure to push this out over social media and on our subscription platforms. And that has been this week's episodes of Undivided. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your commitment to giving common sense a comeback. We will have an excellent episode about parental rights, about what's happening in the state of Washington and across the country with gender and sports. So I hope you can join me for that. If you've not become a subscriber already, you can do so for just $5 a month by signing up at undividedpod.com. That's undividedpod.com. So subscribers, we will see you hopefully Saturday, everyone. If not, subscribers will see you Sunday. The rest of you will see you back here on the live show on Monday at noon.